since we got cut off. And I'm going to start where it originally started messing up, and then I'm going to try to splicing the two together, and we're going to see how that goes. So, where did we leave off? Chapter 15. John held forth for the next 10 minutes or so. He hadn't been on the case long, but had already started a lot of balls rolling. Okay, it's still going good. A fellow in California was gathering facts about Roger DeVore and Morris Ridding. Gathering facts sounded so much better than snooping. John was particularly interested in learning about the quality of Roger DeVore's relations with his father, and if Roger was on record concerning his little niece from Maine. John had also mapped out a campaign to learn as much as possible about Max DeVore's movements and activities since he'd come back. To that end, he had the name of a private investigator, one recommended by Sinet, my rental lawyer. As he spoke, paging rapidly through a little notebook he drew from the inside pocket of his suit coat, I remembered about Lady Justice during our telephone conversation. Slapped some handcuffs on the broad's wrist, on that broad's wrist, and some tape over her mouth to go along with the blindfold. Rape her. That was maybe a little bit too strong for what we were doing, but I thought at the very least we were shoving her around a little. Phoebe and the dogs are being mean. I imagined poor Roger DeVore up on the stand having flown 3,000 miles in order to be questioned about his sexual preferences. I had to keep reminding myself that his father had put him in that position. Not Maddie, not me, not John Storrow. Have you gotten any closer to a meeting with DeVore and his chief legal advisor? I asked. Don't know for sure. The line is in the water, the offer's on the table, the puck's on the ice. Pick your favorite metaphor, mix them and match them if you desire. Got your irons in the fire, Maddie said. Your checkers on the board, I added. We looked at each other and laughed. John regarded us sadly, then sighed, picked up his sandwich, and began to eat again. You really have to meet him with his lawyer more or less dancing attendance? I asked. Think ever DeVore can do it all again based on unethical behavior by Mary DeVore's legal resource? John returned. Don't even joke about it, Maddie cried. I wasn't joking, John said. It has to be with his lawyer, yes. I don't think it's going to happen, not on this trip. I haven't even got a look at the old caca. And I have to tell you, my curiosity is killing me. If that's all it takes to make you happy, show up behind the backstop at the softball field on Tuesday evening, Maddie said. He'll be there in his fancy wheelchair, laughing and clapping and sucking his damned old oxygen every 15 minutes or so. Not a bad idea, John said. I have to go back to New York for the weekend. I'm leaving après Osgood. Maybe I'll show up on Tuesday. I might even bring my glove. He began clearing up our litter, and once again I thought he looked about both prissy and endearing at the same time. Like Stan Laurel wearing an apron. Maddie eased him aside and took over. No one ate any Twinkies, she said a little sadly. Take them home to your daughter, John said. No way, I don't let her eat that stuff like that. What kind of mother do you think I am? She saw our expressions, replayed what she just said, then burst out laughing. We joined her. Maddie's old Scout was parked in one of the slant spaces behind the War Memorial, which in Castle Rock is a World War I soldier with a generous helping of bird shit on his pie-shaped helmet. A brand new Taurus with a Hertz decal above the inspect was next. John tossed his briefcase, reassuringly thin and very ostentatious, into the back seat. If I can make it back on Tuesday, I'll call you, he told Maddie. If I'm able to get an appointment with your father-in-law through this man Osgood, I will also call you. I'll buy the Italian sandwiches, Maddie said. He smiled, then grasped her arm in one hand and mine in the other. He looked like a newly ordained minister getting ready to marry his first couple. You two talk on the telephone if you need to, he said, always remembering that one or both may be tapped. Meet in the market if you happen to. Mike, you might feel free feel the need to drop by the local library and check out a book. Not until you renew your card, though, Maddie said, giving me a demure glance. But no more visits to Maddie's trailer. Is that understood? I said yes. She said yes. Don Storrow looked unconvinced. It made me wonder if he was seeing something in our faces or bodies that shouldn't be there. They are committed to a line of attack which probably isn't going to work, he said. We can't risk giving them the chance to change course. That means innuendos about the two of you. It also means innuendos about Mike and Kyra. Maddie's shocked expression made her look 12 again. Mike and Kyra, what are you talking about? Allegations of child molestation thrown up by people so desperate they'll try anything. That's ridiculous, she said. If my father-in-law wanted to sling that kind of mud, John nodded yes. We'd be obliged to sling it right back. Newspaper coverage from coast to coast would follow, maybe even court TV. God bless and save us. We want none of that if we can avoid it. It's not good for the grown-ups, and it's not good for the child. Now or later. He bent and kissed Maddie's cheek. I'm sorry about all this, he said. And he did sound genuinely sorry. Custody's just this way. I think you warned me. It's just that the idea that someone might make up a thing like that, might make a thing like that up just because there's no other way for them to win. Let me warn you again, he said. His face came so close to grim as its young probably allow. What we have is a very rich man, a shaky case. The combination could be like working with old dynamite. In a minute. I turned to Maddie. Are you still worried about Kai? Still feel she's in danger? I saw her think about hedging her response. Out of plain old Yankee reserve, quite likely. And then decided not to, deciding perhaps that hedging was a luxury she couldn't afford. Yes, but it's just a feeling, you know? John was frowning. I suppose the idea that Devore might resort to extra-legal means of obtaining what he wanted had occurred to him as well. Keep your eye on her as much as you can, he said. I respect intuition. Is yours based on anything concrete? No, Maddie answered, and her quick glance in my direction asked me to keep my mouth shut. Not really. She opened the scout's door and tossed in the little brown bag with the Twinkies in it. She had decided to keep them after all. Then she turned to John and me with an expression that was close to anger. I'm not sure how to follow that advice anyway. I work 5 days a week, and in August, when we do the microfiche update, it'll be 6. Right now, Kai gets lunch at Vacation Bible School and dinner with Arlene Cullum. I see her in the mornings. The rest of the time, I know what she was going to say before she said it. The expression was an old one. She's on the TR. I could help you find an au pair, I said, thinking it would be a hell of a lot cheaper than John Storrow. No, they said, in such perfect unison that they glanced at each other and laughed. But even while she was laughing, Maddie looked tense and unhappy. We're not going to leave a paper trail for Durgan or Devore's custody team to exploit, John said. Who pays me is one thing. Who pays Maddie's childcare help is another. Besides, I've taken enough from you, Maddie said. More than I can sleep easy on. I'm not going to get in any deeper just because I've been having megrims. She climbed into the Scout and closed the door. I rested my hand on her open window. Now we were on the same level, and the eye contact was strong. It was so strong, it was disconcerting. Maddie, I don't have anything else to spend it on, really. When it comes to John's fee, I accept that. Because John's fee is about Kai. She put her hand over mine and squeezed briefly. This other is about me, all right? Yeah, but you need to tell your babysitter and the people who run the Bible thing that you've got a custody case on your hands, a potentially bitter one, and Kyra's not to go anywhere with anyone, even someone they know, without your say-so. She smiled. It's already been done. On John's advice. Stay in touch, Mike. She lifted her hand, gave it a hearty smack, and drove away. What do you think? I asked John on its way to the new Prouty Bridge, which street and spins outbound traffic on Highway 68.
Where's the 28 clippers at?
I don't know. They're not in here.
They're not in here.
I think it's grand. You can go look in my drawers over there. I think it's grand. She has a well-heeled benefactor. Smart lawyer, John paused, then added, but I'll tell you something. She somehow doesn't feel lucky to me at all. There's a feeling I get, I don't know, that there's a cloud around her you can't quite see. Maybe that's it. He raked his hands through the restless mass of his red hair. I just know it's something sad. I knew exactly what he meant, except for me, there was more. I wanted to be in bed with her, sad or not, right or not. I wanted to feel her hands on me, tugging and pressing and patting and stroking. I wanted to be able to smell her skin and taste her hair. That is such a weird expression. I wanted to have her lips against my ear, her breath tickling the fine hairs within its cup as she told me to do what I wanted, whatever I wanted. I got back to Sara Laughs shortly before 2 o'clock and let myself in, thinking about nothing but my study in the IBM hall. I was writing again. Writing. I could hardly believe it. I'd work, not that it felt much like work after a 4-year layoff, until maybe 6 o'clock, swim, and then go down to the village cafe for one of Buddy's cholesterol-rich specialties. The moment I stepped excuse me. The moment I slept through the door, Bunter's bell began to ring stridently. I stopped in the foyer, my hand frozen on the knob. The house was hot and bright, not a shadow anywhere, but the goose flesh forming on my arms felt like midnight. Who's here? I called. The bell stopped ringing. There was a moment of silence, and then a woman shrieked. It came from everywhere, pouring out of the sunny, moat-laden air like sweat out of hot skin. It was a scream of outrage, anger, grief, but mostly, I think, of horror. And I screamed in response. I couldn't help it. I had been frightened standing in the dark cellar stall, listening to the unseen fist thump on the insulation. But this was far worse. It never stopped, that scream. It faded as the child's sobs had faded. Faded as if the person screaming was being carried rapidly down a long corridor and away from me. As long as it was gone. Or at last it was gone. I leaned against the bookcase. This is all I'm reading. I leaned against the bookcase, my palm pressed against my t-shirt, my heart galloping beneath it. I was gasping for breath, and my muscles had that queer, exploded feel that they get after you've had a case of a... Oy. That you get... I was grasping for breath, and my muscles had that queer, exploded feel they get after you've had a bad scare. A minute passed. My heartbeat gradually slowed, and my breathing slowed with it. I straightened up, took a tottery step, and when my legs held up, took two more. I knew I was going to hiccup. Excuse me. I stood in the kitchen doorway, looking across above the fireplace. Bunter the moose looked glassily back at me. The bell around his neck hung still and chimeless. A hot sun point glowed on its side. The only sound was that stupid Felix the cat clock in the kitchen. The thought nagging me even then was that the screaming woman had been Jo, that Sara Laughs was being haunted by my wife, and that she was in pain. Dead or not, she was in pain. Jo, I asked quietly. Jo, are you? The sobbing began again, the sound of a terrified child. At the same moment, my mouth and nose once more filled with the iron taste of the lake. I put one hand on my throat, gagging and frightened, then leaned over the sink and spat. It had been as before. It was as it had been before. Instead of voiding a gush of water, nothing came out but a little spit. The waterlogged feeling was gone as if it had never been there. I stayed where I was, grasping the counter, looking like a drunk who had finished the party by upchucking most of the night's bottled cheer. I felt like that too, stunned and bleary, too overloaded to really understand what was going on. At last I straightened up again, took the towel folded over the dishwasher handle, and wiped my face with it. There was tea in the fridge, and I wanted a tall, ice-choked glass of it in the worst way. I reached for the door handle and froze. The fruit and vegetable magnets were drawn. In the center was this: "Help, I'm drowned." That's it, I thought. I'm getting out of here right now today. Yet, an hour later, I was up in my stifling study with a glass of tea on the desk beside me, the cubes in it long since melted, dressed only in my bathing trunks, and lost in the world I was making, the one where a private detective named Andy Drake was trying to prove that John Shacklefield was not the serial killer named Baseball Cap. This is how we go on, one day at a time, one meal at a time, one pain at a time, one breath at a time. Dentists go on one root canal at a time. Boat builders go on one hull at a time. If you write books, you go on one page at a time. We turn from all we know and all we fear. We study catalogs, watch football games, choose Sprint over AT&T. We count the birds in the sky, and will not turn from the window when we hear footsteps behind us as something comes up the hall. We say yes, I agree, that clouds often look like other things, fish and unicorns and men on horseback, but they are really only clouds. Even when the lightning flashes inside them, we say they are only clouds and turn our attention to the next meal, the next pain, the next breath, the next page. This is how we go on. And that, my dears, is the end of chapter 15 that we were unable to finish. And so I'm going to say thank you for joining me. I'm so glad you watched. I'm glad you stayed with me. I love y'all. I'm going to work on this, and I'm going to try to splice this portion with the other portion to make a complete video and upload it. If I can do that, I'm going to do that tonight. I don't know what happened, that it was being pushed, but it was, and I didn't like it, and so I finished, instead of doing the two-parter I did for Running Man. So we're going to see how it works out. So I just wanted to say thank you. I appreciate y'all. Y'all are the best at sitting and chilling with me, and I really appreciate it. So I'm going to say goodnight, and I will let y'all know as soon as it's uploaded. You'll see it uploaded. So hopefully in the next hour I can have it up. All right? Love y'all. Thank you for joining me. Bye. Have a good night.